Hello, everyone. Tonight we're diving into a story that begins with something most people would find ordinary, my birthday. But trust me, there's nothing ordinary about what happened next. Imagine celebrating your 65th birthday, sitting at a table that's not really a dining table, but a makeshift one wedged between boxes and motor oil cans in what's supposed to be your apartment. This wasn't a home, it was a converted garage. The kind of place you'd expect to find forgotten tools. Not your mother. And yet, there I was, with my son, Blaine, sitting across from me, his $1,000,000 smile lighting up the dim garage. He asked me, "Mum, have you been enjoying the apartment I gave you?" I could hardly look at him. The words that came out of my mouth felt like they didn't belong to me. "Son, I live in the garage. My daughter, Seline," dropped her glass as if I had just said the most outrageous thing. But I wasn't being dramatic. No, the truth was sitting right there in front of us. The garage smelled faintly of motor oil, and the only real furniture was a cot against the wall. A small, hot plate in the corner. A proper apartment. No, this was my reality. But Blaine, with his designer suit and pride in his voice, didn't see it. He smiled, proudly pushing the glass of wine toward me. "This is lovely." "Darling," I said, forcing a smile, all the while knowing that I was living in a lie. For the first time in a long time, I let myself realize the truth. I had been living in the shadows of my children's generosity, convincing myself that the scraps they threw my way were all I deserved. But tonight, on my 65th birthday, I would no longer pretend. Blaine said, "I just wanted you to be comfortable here. You're my mum, and you deserve the best." But as I looked around, all I saw was emptiness, and Seline, sitting next to him, her face an emotionless mask, tapping her nails against the wine glass. It hit me harder than I expected. They didn't care. They never had. "Mum, it's perfect for you, right?" Blaine asked, but all I could do was whisper, "Son, I live in the garage." Seline, still quiet as ever, made no effort to conceal her thoughts. As always, she was calculating her next move. I had known her long enough to recognize it. She'd always been more interested in controlling the narrative than in the truth. And now, it seemed like the story we'd all been telling ourselves for years of a loving family, of sacrifice and reward, was just that, a story where I had become the supporting character. As Blaine processed what I had just said, the weight of the silence in the room began to shift. Everything was about to change. The silence stretched on, thick and uncomfortable. As Blaine's mind tried to process what had just hit him, I watched him, wondering how long it would take for him to see what I had known for years. The image of his face confusion, mixed with a tinge of disbelief, stayed with me. The man who had everything couldn't understand why his mother, had accepted living in a garage, but there it was, the truth. I had lived in that garage for 3 years, and Blaine had never once questioned it. Seline, who had barely acknowledged my presence until now, finally spoke up, her voice sharp. "You should be grateful," she said, her words cutting through the air like ice. "He did this for you. He didn't have to." But Celine's words were nothing but a hollow defense. She, too, had known the truth. She had known all along that I wasn't living in a real apartment, but she had kept that information from Blaine. Why to keep me isolated? To make sure her brother never saw how she manipulated the situation, to control the narrative as she always had. The realization was a blow to my chest. The words I had swallowed for years now spilled out, like a dam that had finally broken. "Grateful for what?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. "For a place that smells like motor oil. For a home that's little more than a storage unit with a bed." Celine's eyes flashed, but she said nothing. Instead, she gave a quick glance to Blaine, her expression hardening. like a chess player who had just realized the game was over. Blaine, still seated across from me, began to shake his head slowly. His world, the one he had so carefully built, was falling apart in front of him. "Mum," he began, his voice trembling. "I don't understand. Why didn't you say anything?" I wanted to laugh, but I couldn't. It wasn't funny. It was heartbreaking. "Why didn't you ask?" I said softly. "For 3 years. I lived here, pretended I was fine, that I didn't mind. You didn't ask because it was easier to believe the lie." Blaine leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair, a gesture I had seen him do 100 times when he was lost in thought. But this wasn't just about a misunderstanding. This was about a pattern of neglect, a story I had allowed to unfold without question. I had convinced myself that this was enough, that the love and generosity from my children, no matter how misguided, was all I deserved. But now, in the harsh light of my birthday, with the candles flickering on the table between us, I could see everything clearly. I was not living in the garage. I had been hidden away there, pushed aside and forgotten. The broken glass from Celine's wine spilled across the cold concrete floor, staining it with red. I didn't notice the mess, though my mind was too focused on Blaine's reaction, on the way his eyes darted between me and Seline, trying to make sense of the truth that had been sitting in front of him all this time. "You should have told me," Blaine muttered, his words low. "Why didn't you just tell me the truth?" "I tried," I whispered back, feeling the weight of years of silence pressing down on me. "I wanted to tell you, but every time I did, you weren't listening, or Seline was there, making sure you didn't hear." Seline stiffened at the accusation, but she didn't deny it. Instead, she stood up abruptly, her chair scraping across the floor as she paced the small space of the garage. "This is ridiculous. You're making a mountain out of a molehill," she snapped. "Blaine, we've taken care of her. She has everything she needs." "Everything she needs," Blaine's voice cracked, his disbelief turning into anger. "She's been living in a garage. Seline, you've been lying to me. For 3 years." Seline, caught off guard by Blaine's sudden outburst, faltered for a moment. Then, as if a switch had been flipped, she snapped back into her defensive mode. "It was a temporary solution. Blaine, you knew how much she hated moving. We thought this would be better than nothing, and I didn't want to burden you with it. You were busy." But Blaine, his face now pale, was no longer buying her excuses. He turned to me. "How long, Mum?" His voice was tight. "How long has this been going on? How long have you been living like this?" I took a breath, steadying myself. 3 years, I said, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. 3 years of pretending everything was okay, of pretending I didn't mind living in a garage, while you thought I had a real apartment. And the worst part is, I made myself believe it, too. The silence that followed was suffocating. Seline was quiet now, her lips pressed into a thin line, her eyes flicking nervously toward Blaine. I could see the wheels turning in her head, calculating how to spin this, how to make herself look like the hero. But for once, the truth had surfaced, and there was no hiding from it. Blaine stood up suddenly, his chair scraping across the floor in his haste. "I need to see the main house," he said, his voice low and determined. I nodded, feeling the weight of the past few years lift just a little. The truth had been told, and now the pieces of the puzzle were finally coming together. We stood in silence as Blaine's words echoed in the small garage. "I need to see the main house, he repeated, his voice firm but filled with something else, regret, maybe, or disbelief. I couldn't tell. All I knew was that the moment I had feared for so long had finally arrived. The truth was out, and there was no going back. Seline, however, was not ready to give up so easily. She shifted uncomfortably, clearly trying to regain control of the situation. "Blaine, this is unnecessary," she said, her voice cool, but I could hear the cracks beneath her calm exterior. "The garage is fine. She's been fine. There's no need to stir up more drama." "No," Blaine said sharply, his eyes locking onto hers with an intensity I hadn't seen in years. "You've been lying to me, to both of us, for years. I need to see the house. Now." I watched as Celine's mask of composure began to slip, her lips tightening as she realized the game was over. With a heavy sigh, she turned away, motioning for us to follow her. We walked out of the garage and toward the house, the distance between us and the truth growing smaller with each step. As we stood at the front door of the main house, I felt my heart race in my chest. This was the moment where everything would be laid bare. I had lived in a garage, but now I was about to see the house that Blaine had thought I was living in all along, the house that had been sitting empty, waiting for me to claim it, the house that was supposed to be mine. Seline unlocked the door with a quick twist of the key, and we stepped in. The air inside was different, warmer, more alive. There was something in the way the sunlight streamed through the windows, casting soft shadows on the polished hardwood floors. The house was beautiful, a place I could have only dreamed of living in, a real home. Blaine's face betrayed his shock as he took in the sight before him, the spacious living room, the gleaming kitchen, the wide staircase leading to the upper floors. Every detail screamed comfort and luxury. My heart sank as I realized how much my children had kept from me. They had believed I was content in a tiny garage, while this place had been waiting for me all along. "Mum, this is..." Blaine started, his voice faltering, but I could see the wheels turning in his mind as the pieces of the puzzle clicked into place. "This is supposed to be your home, the place I set up for you." He looked around, his confusion deepening with every passing second. "But why didn't you tell me?" I took a deep breath, letting the weight of the truth settle into my bones. "I never told you because I thought it was enough. I thought that living in the garage was the best I could do, that I should be grateful for whatever scraps of love and care you could spare me. I never wanted to complain. I just wanted to make sure you both were happy." Seline, standing behind us, scoffed. "Stop playing the victim. Mom, you've had your share. We've done everything for you, everything for me." I asked, my voice quiet but strong. "You put me in a garage, Seline, and you let me live there, thinking I was too grateful to ask for more." Blaine's face was pale now, his eyes darting between me and Seline. It was clear that he was trying to process the depth of the betrayal, but it was too much for him to absorb all at once. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked Seline, his voice shaking with frustration. "Because I was protecting you," Seline snapped. But the anger in her voice didn't mask the fear creeping in. "I didn't want you to have to deal with it. You were too busy with your company. You had enough on your plate. I was just trying to make sure you didn't have to worry about Mum." "But this isn't protection," Blaine said, his voice growing louder, sharper. "This is manipulation. You've been keeping the truth from me. You've been controlling everything for years." I watched as Celine's composure faltered. The coldness in her eyes was replaced by something else, something almost human, though it wasn't enough to hide the truth. "I've been handling things for you," she said quietly, almost defensively. "I didn't want you to feel guilty about taking care of Mum. She's always been so independent. I thought she preferred it this way." I looked at her, finally understanding the full scope of her manipulation. "You thought I preferred living in a garage?" I asked softly. "You thought I preferred being isolated from my son, living in squalor, while you lived here in this house, with all the comforts I could never have?" Seline didn't respond. She stood there, her eyes avoiding mine, as the weight of her actions settled in the room. "She's been living in this house, Blaine," I said, my voice steady, though my heart was breaking. "And you didn't know. You never questioned it. You didn't see how she kept you in the dark. She controlled everything, including the story I told myself." Blaine's face went white as the full realization hit him. He had been living a lie. His sister, the woman he trusted, had orchestrated this entire situation. "I need to make some calls," he muttered, stepping back, his mind already spinning with the implications of everything we had uncovered. Seline glared at me. "You don't understand," she said, her voice trembling with rage. "I did this for us, for the family." But her words were hollow. The damage had been done, and as Blaine left the room to process everything, I stood in the middle of the house I should have been living in, feeling a strange sense of both loss and relief. I had lived in the garage, convinced I was unworthy of anything more, but now I could see the truth. I had been more than enough, and I would never let anyone make me feel small again. The quiet that followed Blaine's departure was almost deafening. Seline stood still, her gaze fixed on the polished hardwood floor, her fingers nervously twisting the edge of her coat. It was clear she wasn't ready to face the reality of everything that had just come to light. But I couldn't stand there, waiting for her to gather herself. I had been patient for far too long. "Seline," I said softly, my voice calm despite the turmoil swirling inside me. "How long did you think this could go on? How long did you think you could keep up this lie?" She didn't respond at first. Instead, she crossed her arms over her chest and looked away. Avoiding eye contact, I could see her struggling to come up with an excuse, some way to justify everything she'd done, but there was nothing left to say. The truth was undeniable, and it had shattered the image she had worked so hard to maintain. "I did it for you, Blaine," she finally said, her voice shaky, defensive. "I didn't want you to worry. I wanted you to focus on your business, on your success. You didn't need to know the details. Mum was fine. She didn't need anything more. She was happy." "Happiness," I repeated, almost incredulously. "Happiness is not living in a garage, Seline. Happiness is not pretending that everything is okay when it's not." She turned away from me, her back rigid with tension. "You don't understand," she said, her voice low. "I kept it together. I made sure you didn't have to deal with the mess. I protected you both from the truth. And now, you're making me the villain." "You are the villain," I said, my words cutting through the air like a blade. "You've been controlling everything. You've kept Blaine and me in the dark, making decisions for us, pretending it was all for our good. But you were the one who benefited. You were the one who used us, who used our love and trust for your own gain." Celine's face contorted with anger. "You don't get it, do you?" she spat. "I've been the one handling everything. I've been the one dealing with Mom's problems, making sure everything was under control. And now you want to blame me for everything, for trying to protect this family, for making sure that you didn't have to see what was really going on." I stared at her, my heart aching. "You didn't protect me, Seline. You manipulated me. You manipulated both of us, and you used my love for you as a shield. You thought I wouldn't see it, but I see it now. I see everything." There was no more hiding behind false promises or explanation. The woman standing before me, the one I had once trusted, was nothing more than a stranger. The person who had shaped my life, who had controlled every move I made, was my own daughter, and I was done. "I'm done," I said, my voice steady now. "With you, with all of this." Her face flickered with surprise, then hardened into an expression of cold fury. "You can't just cut me out, Mum," she snarled. "You can't throw me away like this." "I'm not throwing you away. I replied quietly. I'm just finally seeing you for who you really are. I turned away from her, the weight of the years of sacrifice and manipulation lifting from my shoulders. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. I was free. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again. Seline didn't say anything else. She stood there, staring at me as I walked away, her words hanging in the air like an empty threat. I didn't care. The truth had been revealed, and now there was no turning back. She had lost everything: her power, her control, her hold over me. The next morning, Blaine arrived early. I could tell by the way he looked that he hadn't slept, that he was still processing everything that had happened. He looked at me with a mix of guilt and concern, his brow furrowed as he approached. "Mum," he said quietly, sitting down across from me at the kitchen table. "I don't know what to say. I'm sorry. I should have known. I should have seen it." I shook my head, trying to ease his guilt. "You couldn't have known, Blaine. You were busy, and I didn't want you to worry." "But I should have asked," he said, his voice tinged with regret. "I should have been more involved, and I should have paid more attention. I should have noticed the signs." I reached across the table, placing my hand on his. "You're not to blame for any of this, Blaine. You were trying to do what was best for me, just like I tried to do what was best for you, but we both got caught in the web of lies. Now, all we can do is move forward." Blaine nodded, his face softening with relief. "I'm glad you're okay. Mum, I'm glad you're finally free." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the past few days settling between us. It felt different now. For the first time in a long time, I felt like we were on the same side, no longer divided by secrets and manipulation. I wasn't just his mother anymore. I was someone he could count on, someone who had the strength to fight back. "I'm not angry anymore, Blaine," I said quietly, breaking the silence. "I'm not angry at you or at Seline. I'm just tired. Tired of living in fear, tired of feeling like I don't matter. But I'm done with that. I'm done pretending that what's been happening is okay." Blaine's eyes softened with understanding. "You matter, Mum," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You've always mattered, and I promise you, I'll never let you feel like you're not important again." For the first time in a long time, I believed him. As the days passed, I felt a shift within me, a slow but steady transformation. I wasn't sure when it happened, but I realized that I had finally stopped seeing myself as the woman who had spent years in the shadows, playing along with everyone else's version of my life. No longer was I the silent participant in my own story. I was becoming the author of my own future. Blaine and I spent more time together, fixing the mess that had been made. He helped me move into the main house, the one that was finally mine. He was there when we unpacked boxes, when I chose where to place my furniture, and when I planted flowers in the garden. It was strange, walking around this beautiful house and knowing that I was meant to be here all along. It felt like a dream I had been too afraid to believe in. But now, I could see it clearly. Seline didn't contact me after the confrontation. At first, I waited for her to reach out, maybe with an apology, or even just a text to say she was sorry. But nothing came. I knew she was too proud, too calculating to ever admit her wrongs. And part of me wasn't sure I cared anymore. The moment I had been waiting for, the moment I had feared, was finally here. I had lost my daughter, but I had gained something more important, my own sense of self-respect. I still thought about Seline sometimes, about the little girl who used to sit on my lap and beg for stories, about the teenager who resented every sacrifice I made. I wondered if she would ever understand what she had done, or if she would keep hiding behind her walls of pride and manipulation. But I wasn't sure it mattered. The truth was, Seline wasn't the same person I had raised. She had chosen a path, and I had chosen mine. A few weeks later, the doorbell rang, breaking my peaceful reverie. I went to answer it. expecting nothing more than the usual deliveries or neighbours stopping by. But when I opened the door, I found a woman standing there, holding a small child in her arms. The woman was unfamiliar, but the baby had Seline's eyes. "I'm sorry to disturb you," the woman said, her voice calm but hesitant. "Are you Mrs. Holloway?" I nodded, my heart suddenly racing. "Yes, I am. Can I help you?" The woman hesitated for a moment, glancing at the baby in her arms before speaking again. "My name is Amanda Chen. I'm Marcus's sister. I know we've never met, but I wanted to introduce you to someone." With that, she carefully lifted the child from her carrier and handed her to me. "This is your granddaughter. Her name is Emma." I stood frozen, my heart thundering in my chest as I held the tiny child in my arms. Emma, my granddaughter, the little girl who had been so far out of reach, someone I had never expected to meet, was now in my arms, staring up at me with curious eyes. For a moment, I was speechless, overwhelmed by the weight of the moment. I looked up at Amanda, who was watching me carefully. "Marcus wanted you to meet her," she explained softly. "He believes you have a right to know your granddaughter, regardless of what happened with Seline. And he's asked me to bring her to you." The tears welled up in my eyes, and I blinked them back, trying to steady my breath. I had never imagined this moment would come. After all the years of distance and hurt, here was my granddaughter, someone I could love without conditions, without the baggage of betrayal. "How is she?" I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "She's doing well," Amanda said, smiling warmly. "Marcus has full custody now. He's a wonderful father, and he wanted me to give you this." She handed me an envelope, and I took it with trembling hands, feeling the weight of the moment pressed down on me. I opened the envelope, my heart racing as I pulled out a letter. "Dear Mrs. Holloway, I hope this letter finds you well. I'm writing to let you know that I had no idea what Seline was doing to you. If I had known, I would have intervened immediately. I know we've never spoken before, but I want to assure you that Emma deserves to know you. She deserves to have you in her life, and you deserve to know her. I'm asking if you would consider being a part of Emma's life. I know there have been misunderstandings and hurt between our families, but I believe Emma deserves to have a relationship with her grandmother. Seline will have supervised visits once she's released, but I want you to know that Emma has a family who will treat her with kindness and respect. Sincerely, Marcus Chen." I held the letter in my hands, reading it over again as the weight of Marcus's words settled in. After everything Seline had done, Marcus, her ex-husband, was still offering me a chance to be part of Emma's life. I felt the rush of emotions, grief, joy, hope. This was a second chance, not just for me, but for my granddaughter, a chance to show her love without the toxic patterns of the past. "Would you like to hold her?" Amanda asked, breaking my thoughts. I nodded, carefully taking Emma back into my arms. She was warm, a little bundle of innocence, her tiny hands grasping at the fabric of my blouse. I felt my heart swell as I gazed at her, and for the first time in a long while, I knew I had a purpose again. Amanda smiled softly, stepping back. "We'll be in touch. Marcus is eager to see you and Emma together again. He just wants what's best for her." I smiled back, my heart light for the first time in years. "Thank you, Amanda. Thank you for bringing her to me." As Amanda and Emma left, I stood in the doorway, watching them drive away. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of peace. The pain of the past was still there, but it was no longer controlling me. I had something to look forward to now, something pure and new. My family might have been broken, but through Emma, I had a chance to rebuild, and I would make sure that this time love would come without sacrifice. A few days after Emma's visit, I found myself standing in my newly tended garden, my hands covered in soil as I deadheaded the roses that had bloomed with unexpected vibrancy. The air was crisp, the morning sun casting a soft glow over the flowers, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known I needed. The chaos of the past few months had finally begun to fade, replaced by the quiet contentment of knowing I was in control of my own life. No longer was I living under the shadow of my children's manipulations. Blaine had taken a leave of absence from his company, something I had never expected. He spent more time with me, often helping with the little things, like setting up appointments or moving my things into the main house. It was as if he were trying to make up for the years that had been lost to Celine's control. He'd been a busy man, consumed with work, and while I had always believed he was doing it for our family, I now saw how much of his attention had been diverted. One afternoon, as we sat together in the kitchen, me with a cup of tea, and Blaine sipping on his coffee, he broke the silence that had comfortably settled between us. "I've been thinking a lot, Mum," he began, his voice thoughtful, as if weighing every word, "about everything, about how I never really saw you." I met his gaze, a bittersweet smile on my lips. "You saw me," I said gently, "but you didn't see me, not the way you do now." He nodded slowly, his expression clouded with regret. "I don't know how I missed it, how I didn't notice that Seline was keeping you isolated, how I let it happen." "You couldn't have known, Blaine," I reassured him. "I didn't tell you either. I wanted you to focus on your life, but now I see how much I let that lie stretch on." He sat back in his chair, running a hand through his hair, as if the truth was still too raw to process fully. "I was so caught up in my own world. I never realized what was happening to you. I just assumed everything was fine, that you were fine. Because that's what I told you," I said, my voice quiet. "Because I wanted to protect you, to make sure you didn't have to carry my burdens." Blaine's eyes softened, and I saw a mixture of guilt and understanding there. "I should have been there, Mum. I should have asked more. I should have known." "You were doing what you thought was best," I said. "But the real question is, what are we going to do now?" Blaine didn't answer immediately, but I could see that the wheels were turning in his head. He was working through the layers of guilt and realization, but there was also something else, determination. "We move forward," he finally said, "together, and we make sure that no one else takes advantage of you, or anyone else, ever again." His words brought a tear to my eye, and I wiped it away quickly, not wanting to show too much emotion. But I was overwhelmed by his sincerity. This was the Blaine I had always hoped he could be, the man who was willing to make things right, even when it meant facing uncomfortable truths. For the next few weeks, Blaine and I worked together to rebuild what had been broken. We went through old paperwork, sorted out finances, and made sure everything was in order. It wasn't easy. There were moments when the weight of the past seemed too much to bear, when the anger and betrayal threatened to resurface. But every time I looked at Blaine, I remembered that the love between us hadn't disappeared. It had just been buried beneath years of manipulation and misunderstandings. As I spent more time in the house, I felt the layers of my past slowly peeling away. The coldness I had once felt in the garage, the feeling of being pushed aside, was replaced by warmth and comfort. The house, which had once felt foreign and daunting, now felt like home. The flowers I had planted began to bloom, just as my sense of self-worth blossomed. And then, one afternoon, as I sat on the porch with a cup of tea in my hands, I heard the familiar sound of a car pulling up the driveway. I looked up to see Amanda and Emma again, and my heart leapt. They had come to visit once more. I stood to greet them, my smile wide. "Hello, sweetheart," I said to Emma, who was nestled in Amanda's arms, her dark eyes already studying me curiously. "Hi," Mrs. Holloway, Amanda said with a warm smile, we thought we'd stop by and see how you're doing. Emma giggled softly, and I couldn't help but laugh too. It's so good to see you both, I said, my heart swelling with a kind of joy I hadn't known I was missing. Come on in. Let me get you some tea. As we sat together in the living room, chatting about everyday things, Amanda's work, Emma's progress, and how the garden was doing, everything felt so right. I could feel the pieces of my life finally falling into place. For years, I had lived in a state of limbo, my sense of self eroded by the actions of those closest to me. But now, I was finally rebuilding. I was no longer a passive observer in my own story. I was the one writing the next chapters, with love, honesty, and hope. Later that evening, Blaine and I sat on the back porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The colours in the sky were soft and peaceful, a reflection of the peace I had finally found within myself. You know, Blaine said, his voice quiet. I've been thinking a lot about the future, about Emma, about you, about everything we've been through. I turned to him, a smile tugging at my lips. What about it? I don't know what's coming next, he said, looking out at the sunset. But I know that whatever it is, we're going to face it together, and we're going to do it the right way, the way it should have always been. I nodded, feeling a sense of contentment wash over me. I couldn't change the past, but I had control over the future, and with Blaine and Emma by my side, I was ready to embrace whatever came next. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of new beginnings. There was something exhilarating about starting over, even when the past was still fresh in my mind. The change wasn't instant, it couldn't be, but with every step, I felt lighter. I had reclaimed my life, my dignity, and most importantly, my independence. I could breathe without feeling like I was suffocating under the weight of my past decisions. Blaine and I began to rebuild our relationship from scratch. He'd been the son I always hoped for, but I had allowed circumstances to distance us. Now, we were learning how to communicate again, how to be a family without the toxic influence of Seline clouding everything. I wasn't sure how much of it was Blaine's guilt, or if it was his true desire to make things right. But whatever the reason, I was grateful. I was starting to feel like a person again, not a mother whose needs were overlooked, but someone whose voice mattered. As for Seline, I hadn't heard from her since the confrontation in the house. At first, I had braced myself for her to show up at the doorstep, demanding explanations, or worse, trying to manipulate me into believing that her actions were justified. But that day never came. The silence stretched on, and though I had no idea what she was planning, I knew it didn't matter anymore. I had finally broken free from her grasp. There were moments when I wondered if I would ever forgive her for what she had done, for the years she had stolen from me, and for the family dynamics she had destroyed. But the truth was, I didn't need her apology. I didn't need her approval. I needed to let go of the anger, the bitterness, and the guilt she had instilled in me for so long. I kept busy. I enrolled in a local gardening class, something I had always wanted to do but had never made time for. There was something incredibly peaceful about working with my hands, watching the plants grow and bloom. It felt like a metaphor for my own life slowly, steadily. I was growing too. My confidence was returning, and I was finding joy in the small things tending to my garden, reading books in the sun, laughing with Blaine and Sarah as we shared stories about our days. One afternoon, as I stood in my garden pruning the roses, I received a phone call that would change everything. It was from Marcus, Mrs. Holloway. His voice was soft but steady. I wanted to check in with you. I know things have been difficult, but I've been thinking a lot about Emma and her future. I'd like for you to be part of that future. I want you to get to know her and for her to know you. I was taken aback for a moment. After everything Seline had done, after all the walls I had built to protect myself, Marcus's voice was like a lifeline. He wasn't asking for anything. He was simply offering a chance for Emma to have a family, a chance for me to finally embrace the role I had always wanted to play. I'd love that, I said, my voice thick with emotion. I really would. I want to be a part of her life. I want to show her the love I never got to show her mother. Marcus smiled on the other end of the line, and I could hear the relief in his voice. I know this is all a lot, but I believe it's the right thing. You've got a lot of love to give, and Emma needs that. From that moment, everything seemed to shift. I started making plans to see Emma more frequently, to take part in her life, to be the grandmother I had always hoped to be. It felt surreal, like a dream I was afraid to wake up from, but it was real. Emma was real, and she was mine to love. Blaine, too, was eager to spend more time with her, and as we took turns visiting Marcus and Emma, the three of us found a rhythm. There was laughter in the house again, and love and hope, and I started to see the future differently. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. I was thriving. I was a mother and a grandmother, someone who had been through the hardest of times but had come out stronger. I wasn't a victim. I was a survivor. As for Seline, I had no idea what she was doing or where she was. She had cut herself off from me, and I couldn't bring myself to care anymore. It was a painful realization, but it was also a liberating one. I had given her my love, my sacrifices, and my trust. But in the end, it was her choices, not mine, that had led us to this point. And while I would always carry the memories of the mother I had tried to be for her, I knew now that my first responsibility was to myself. I owed it to myself to live the life I had always dreamed of, to rebuild what had been broken, and to show Emma that love, real love, was something that never came with conditions. The following months were filled with more visits, more laughter, and more small moments that made everything feel whole again. I spent Sundays with Emma, teaching her how to garden, showing her how to care for the roses that bloomed in the garden we had planted together. She had my eyes, and even though she was so young, I could see that she would grow up to be strong, independent, and full of love. It wasn't easy, learning to live without the weight of my past, but it was worth it. Every day was a step toward healing, and every day I became more certain of one thing: the best was yet to come. The mornings had become my favourite time of day, as the sun filtered through the curtains, casting a soft glow on the kitchen table. I found peace in the little rituals that marked the start of each new day: the smell of freshly brewed coffee, the quiet hum of the refrigerator, the soft sound of birds chirping outside. These small things had always been there, but I had never truly noticed them before. Now, I embraced them with a sense of gratitude that I hadn't felt in years. I sat down at the table one morning, a cup of coffee in hand. As I thought about the path I had walked, I wasn't sure how long it would take to fully heal from everything that had happened. But I knew I was getting there. The scars were still there, of course, but they weren't as raw anymore. They were fading, becoming part of the story I would tell Emma someday, a story of resilience, of love, and of the courage to start over. Blaine had been spending more time with me, coming over for dinner and to check in on how things were going. It wasn't just about keeping me company anymore. It was about rebuilding what had been broken. Slowly but surely, we were mending the bond that had been strained for so long. There were moments when I caught myself thinking back to the days when we were a family, before everything had been torn apart by secrets and lies. But those memories didn't bring pain anymore. They brought understanding. "How's the garden coming along?" Blaine asked one evening, as we sat on the back porch, the soft breeze carrying the scent of fresh flowers. "It's coming along nicely," I said with a smile. my eyes lingering on the roses I had planted. I've even added a few new plants. I'm learning as I go. Blaine chuckled. You always did have a green thumb. I grinned. Maybe I've always known more than I thought. Just needed the right time and space to grow. He looked at me with a smile, his expression softening. I'm proud of you, Mum. His words hit me deeper than I expected. I had spent so much of my life trying to make everyone else proud, trying to prove my worth. But hearing Blaine say that, after everything we'd been through, made me realize how far I had come. I wasn't just a mother anymore. I wasn't just someone's caretaker or afterthought. I was someone worth being proud of, someone who had fought for her life and was ready to live it fully. A few weeks later, the day came when I finally had the chance to see Emma again. I had been looking forward to it for days, knowing that each visit with her was another chance to build a relationship based on trust and love. As I walked up to the door of Marcus's house, my heart fluttered with excitement. This time, I wasn't just meeting a granddaughter I barely knew, I was meeting a piece of my future. Marcus greeted me with a warm smile, and as he opened the door, I saw Emma standing in the living room, playing with a stuffed bear. Her dark curls bounced as she moved, her little feet pattering against the floor. When she saw me, her face lit up, and for a moment, I felt like the world had stopped spinning. This little girl, this precious soul, was mine to love. Hi, Grandma, Emma said, her voice sweet and innocent. As she ran toward me, her arms wide open for a hug, I knelt down, tears welling in my eyes as I wrapped her in my arms. Hi, sweetheart, I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. I'm so happy to see you. Marcus watched us from the doorway, a proud smile on his face. She's been asking about you, he said, his voice filled with affection. She's excited to spend time with her grandma. We spent the afternoon together, Emma showing me her favourite toys, asking me questions about everything and nothing all at once. There was no rush, no pressure. It was just the two of us, connecting, learning about each other in the most natural way. And I knew in that moment that everything I had gone through, every sacrifice, every painful moment had led me here, to this child, this love, and this second chance at a family. When it was time to leave, Marcus gave me a warm hug and a promise. You're welcome to visit any time, Janine. Emma needs you in her life, and I'm glad you're here for her. I nodded, my heart full. Thank you, Marcus, for everything. As I left their home that day, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in a long time. The past was still there, lingering like a shadow, but it no longer controlled me. I had learned to embrace the future, to find joy in the little moments, and to open myself up to the possibility of real love and connection. The following months were filled with more visits, more laughter, and more bonding. Blaine and I continued to rebuild our relationship, and Emma became a regular part of my life. Every moment with her was a gift, a reminder of what I had fought for. My garden flourished, just as my heart did, and I realized that, in the end, the greatest gift was not just the house, or the money, or the apologies. It was the chance to be part of a family again, to truly be seen and loved. Seline, wherever she was, could no longer take from me. She had tried to control my narrative, to strip away my dignity, but in the end, it was I who had the last word. I had taken back control, and nothing could ever take that away from me. As I stood in my garden one evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I realized that I was finally at peace. The past had shaped me, but it no longer defined me. I had found my strength, my voice, and my family, and for the first time in a long time, I was truly living. As the months passed, I found myself settling into a rhythm I hadn't known in years. I woke up each day with a sense of purpose, and as I moved through my daily tasks, I felt the weight of my past lift a little more each time. There were moments when I would catch myself smiling, truly smiling, and I would wonder when that had become a natural reaction. I had spent so long suppressing my happiness, worrying about others, that I had forgotten how to simply enjoy the peace I had earned. Blaine and I, for all the time we had lost, were starting to build something real. We'd started having dinner together more often. Sometimes it was just the two of us, sometimes with Sarah as well. It wasn't much, but it was enough. We shared stories, we laughed, and most importantly, we listened. There were no more unspoken words, no more silence between us. For the first time, I felt like a part of his life in a way I hadn't in years. He was no longer a distant son, someone who was too busy with his own world to care about mine. He was present, and that was all I needed. On one such evening, after dinner, we sat on the back porch, the summer night air warm and comforting. Blaine was quiet, his eyes looking out over the garden, and I could tell he was deep in thought. "Mum," he began, his voice low. "I've been thinking about something, about everything that happened with Seline, and how I didn't see it for so long. And I can't help but feel like I failed you." I shook my head, not wanting him to carry that burden. "You didn't fail me, Blaine. You did what you thought was best. I was the one who let things slide for so long. We were both caught in the same lie." "But I should have known," he persisted, his voice tinged with regret. "I should have seen it. I should have seen how she was isolating you. I should have done something sooner." "You weren't the only one blinded by the lies," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "We both were. But what matters now is that we're here, together, and we're fixing what was broken." Blaine smiled, the guilt still lingering in his eyes. But there was something else too, a sense of relief. "Yeah, you're right, we are, and I'm just glad I'm finally here for you. Really here." I nodded, feeling a warmth spread through me. This was the son I had always known he could be, the one who cared, who loved, and though the past was far from perfect, I knew we had the power to shape our future together. The following weeks were filled with more milestones. Emma continued to be a bright spot in my life, her laughter filling the spaces of my home. She was growing quickly, her personality shining through in everything she did. I took her to the park, to the zoo, and for walks in the garden. I wanted to teach her everything I knew about flowers, about love, about strength. She may have been too young to understand it all now, but I knew the lessons would stick with her in time. One Saturday, as we sat in the living room, Emma climbed into my lap, her small hands gripping my fingers tightly as she looked up at me with those deep, curious eyes. "Grandma," she said, her voice soft, "can I pick some flowers from the garden?" "Of course, sweetheart," I replied, my heart swelling with love. "You can pick as many as you like. Just be gentle with them, okay?" She nodded eagerly and scrambled off my lap, her little legs running toward the door. I followed her into the garden, watching as she carefully picked a few daisies, the flowers she always seemed to love the most. She brought them back to me, holding them up proudly. "Look, Grandma flowers for you," she said, her face beaming with joy. I took the flowers from her, my heart full. "Thank you, Emma. These are beautiful," I whispered, gently brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. "You're going to be a great gardener one day." As Emma ran back to pick more flowers, I stood there for a moment, taking in the peacefulness of the moment. It was such a simple thing, a child picking flowers for her grandmother. But in that moment, I felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The hurt, the years of sacrifice, the confusion, it all seemed so distant now. I was surrounded by love, by family, by the promise of a future that was finally mine to shape. It wasn't long before the holidays arrived, and this year felt different. I wasn't dreading the family gatherings or wondering where I fit in. This year, I was going to be part of something real. Blaine and Sarah invited me to spend Christmas with them, and I was overjoyed to say yes. It wasn't just about the presents or the food, it was about the connection. It was about being seen and appreciated for who I truly was. On Christmas Eve, we gathered around the fireplace in Blaine's home, the room filled with laughter and warmth. Emma, dressed in a little red dress, ran around the room, her face bright with excitement as she tore open her presents. Blaine and Sarah exchanged gifts with me, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was a burden. I felt like I belonged. After dinner, we sat down to watch a movie, the light of the Christmas tree sparkling in the background. Emma climbed into my lap, and I kissed the top of her head, feeling an overwhelming sense of gratitude. This was what family was supposed to feel like. This was what love was supposed to look like. Later that evening, after the movie had ended and the house had quieted down, I stood by the window, looking out at the snow that had started to fall gently outside. Blaine came to stand next to me, his presence warm and comforting. He didn't say anything at first, but I could feel the weight of the moment. "Mum," he said finally, his voice soft. "I'm so glad you're here." I smiled, my heart full. "So am I, Blaine, so am I." As we stood there together, I realized something important. I had spent so much of my life thinking I didn't deserve this, that I wasn't worthy of this kind of love. But I had been wrong. I was worthy. I had always been worthy, and finally, I had learned to believe it. As the new year began, I felt a sense of hope I hadn't known in years. My relationship with Blaine was stronger than ever, and my bond with Emma was growing every day. For the first time in a long time, I was excited about the future. I had everything I needed: love, family, peace. The pain of the past was still there, but it no longer defined me. I was free, and I was finally ready to embrace the life I had always deserved. The first day of the new year dawned crisp and clear. The snow had settled into a soft blanket over the yard, creating a peaceful silence that seemed to wrap the world in a gentle embrace. As I sat at the kitchen table, sipping my coffee, I felt a sense of calm I hadn't experienced in years. The past few months had been a whirlwind of emotions, but now there was a quiet certainty within me. I had survived the storm, and I had emerged stronger, wiser, and ready to embrace the future. Blaine had come over that morning, bringing Sarah along. They both greeted me with warm smiles, and I could tell they were eager to start the new year on a positive note. Emma had stayed home with her dad, and I couldn't wait to spend more time with her in the coming weeks. "Happy New Year, Mum," Blaine said, his voice full of affection as he handed me a small wrapped box. "We wanted to get you something special." I smiled, touched by the gesture. "Thank you," I said, unwrapping the box slowly. Inside, I found a small but beautiful necklace, a simple silver pendant in the shape of a heart. It was delicate, elegant, and somehow felt like a symbol of everything I had been through, everything I had gained. "I love it," I whispered, touched beyond words. "I'm glad," Blaine replied, his eyes softening. "You deserve it, Mum. You deserve everything good that's coming your way." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. I had never been one to ask for much, my whole life. I had been the one who gave sacrificing my own needs for the sake of others. But now, here I was, surrounded by people who truly cared about me. And for the first time, I realized that I deserved this love. I deserved to be cared for, to be cherished, to be seen. "Thank you, Blaine," I said quietly, my voice thick with emotion. "You don't know what this means to me." "Yes, I do," he replied, his smile warm and sincere. "You've been through so much, Mum, and I want to make sure you know you're loved, that you're important to me." I reached out, placing my hand over his. The weight of his words settled deep in my heart. This was the son I had always hoped for, the son who saw me for who I truly was, who understood the depth of my sacrifices and was determined to make up for the lost time. As we sat together, sharing a quiet moment, I realized that this was the beginning of something new. The road ahead wouldn't always be easy. There would be challenges and moments of doubt. But with Blaine, Sarah, and Emma by my side, I knew that we could face anything. Later that day, we gathered around the table to share a meal together. We laughed, reminisced about past holidays, and looked ahead to the future. The light in Blaine's eyes was different now, brighter, more open, and I could see the love he had for Sarah, for Emma, and for me. He had become the man I always knew he could be, and in that moment, I knew that I had done my job as a mother. I had raised him to be strong, compassionate, and capable of great love. Over the following months, I continued to rebuild my life, one step at a time. I spent more time with Emma, helping her learn about the world around her and showing her the beauty of nature. I took her to the park, to the local botanical garden, and we spent hours exploring the wonders of the world through her innocent eyes. Every moment with her was a gift, and I cherished each one. Blaine and I continued to grow closer, and I began to see a side of him I had never known. He had always been my son, but now he was also my equal. We talked openly about the past, about the mistakes we had both made, and how we could move forward. There were no more secrets between us. Our relationship was built on honesty, trust, and love, and with each passing day, I felt our bond grow stronger. Seline remained absent from my life, and though there were moments when I wondered what she was doing or how she was handling everything, I no longer let her actions define me. The woman I had once been dependent, fearful, and silent was no longer the woman I saw in the mirror. I had fought for my life, for my happiness, and I had found my way back to the person I was always meant to be. One day, as I was sitting in the garden, Emma came running toward me, her arms outstretched as she shouted, "Grandma, look what I found!" She held out a small, delicate flower, its petals a soft purple. "It's for you," she exclaimed, her face lighting up with joy. I took the flower from her, my heart swelling with love. "Thank you, sweetheart. It's beautiful." She beamed with pride, her little hands on her hips. "I'm going to plant more flowers. Grandma, you'll have a whole garden of flowers like the one in your house." I laughed, my heart full. "You will be the best gardener, Emma. I'm so proud of you." As I watched Emma run off to collect more flowers, I realized that I had everything I had ever wanted. I had love, I had family, and most importantly, I had peace. Seline might have tried to tear my family apart, but in the end, I had discovered something far more powerful than anything she could take from me. I had rediscovered my worth. I had learned that I was not just a mother, not just a grandmother, but a person who deserved love and respect in equal measure. And as the sun set on another beautiful day, I knew that the best was yet to come. Final thoughts as I sit here now, with the love of my son, my granddaughter, and my friends. I know that life is no longer something I have to endure. It is something I get to live. Every day is a new beginning, and I am ready to face whatever comes next with the strength and grace that I have fought so hard to cultivate. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know one thing: I will never again settle for less than I deserve. The journey wasn't easy, but it was worth every step. And as for the future, well, It's looking brighter than I ever could have imagined.